gotta wait for the stream to connect all the tubes to one another. It's sort of like, plugging the vacuum cleaner into the wall, and you go over there and you click it like multiple times, and it doesn't seem like it's not coming on, and then suddenly it comes on, and you go, oh, it's because you bumped the outlet into the wall socket and it actually connected, just like what happened here on YouTube. Look at that. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, baby. And today we've got a lot to get to. We're talking about Steve Bannon trial day 3. And boy, do we've got a lot to get to today. Let's go over to the mind map and get our bearing straight so we can see what is on the docket. Now, I forgot to mention this. What is going on with this mind map? Let me do a refresh on this because that's not looking right. But I wanted to remind you that you can follow along at home by going to j6mindmap.com, and you'll see right here front and center is the podium thief, the man who almost took control of America. There he is on his way out of the committee, out of the Capitol building with Nancy Pelosi's, I think that was her podium. But today we've got all these different branches. Now we are going to spend the bulk of the day on Bannon because of course that is the news of the day, but there's a lot of tangential J6 news coming out, and we are going to have to take a look at that because Merrick Garland, the guy who is actually prosecuting Steve Bannon over at the DOJ, he gave a statement today. He was actually there in front of Congress, and you'll notice that down here C-SPAN tells us, let me back up on this, or I'm not explaining this very well, but remember, when we've been analyzing what the J6 committee is doing, why is Steve Bannon being prosecuted? What is all of this about? Well, it's about this man right here, right? The head honcho here, El Donaldo Trumpo, who is really enemy number one for many people on the left and the Democrats. And so, the question that we've had is, what is all of this for? What is the end game here? What do they want to accomplish? Where are they trying to take us through this entire saga? Is it to pass the Electoral Count Reform Act so that this doesn't sort of become an issue again? I don't know, Mac. That could be one purpose. Is it to make sure Donald Trump is indicted so that he and he alone is removed from the playing field? Or is it something that's more nefarious than that? Is it to sort of make Donald Trump a symbol and remove him by taking all of his deputies and then castigating an entire political party in order to win elections for your favorite party? I think it is that. But as we've been speculating, we don't really know what it is because the Democrats don't really know what it is. The J6 committee don't know what it is. They've asked many different members, what are you trying to do here? Is there going to be an indictment? What do you think, yes or no? And we covered this on the show many months ago, but there was even disagreement between Steve Bannon and Liz Cheney. Remember, Cheney said, yeah, we got to have an indictment. And Benny's like, well, I don't know. I'm not real sure about this. And you say, wait a minute. They're on the same committee and they can't even get their story straight. So we are looking now to the head guy, right? Attorney General Merrick Garland, the guy who's going to finally tell us, is Steve Bannon being prosecuted because you're trying to indict Trump? Is this the first domino in a long sequence of dominoes? Well, we don't know. But C-SPAN, I have a clip. We'll get to this later. He says that we do not do our investigations in public. Merrick Garland was out there. And he said this is the most wide-ranging investigation that we have ever seen. And so we do have that clip, which we will get to as part of the show. But we also have this story before we dive into Bannon, which is where we're going to start today. We do have this story also that we'll save for later. But here, again, where is this emanating from in our mind map? This is from our notes section. And in our notes, as we've been observing all of the J6 shenanigans and the show trial and so on and so forth, we have been developing our list of counters, right? Counterfactuals, counter arguments, whatever, in order to rebut the claims, because nobody in the Republican Party or sort of the mainstream media has really done a good job of doing this. They sort of are just kind of, if we don't think about January 6th, if we don't think about the committee, then it's not really there. I think that's what the Republican strategy is. It's sort of the ostrich approach. You just sort of, shove your head in the sand and you don't think that it's there, and you just sort of let it all emanate in front of you, even though it's wrecking America. They're okay with it. They don't really care because they also don't like Donald Trump. So as we've been covering at length here, we've got a whole list of the different counters. All right. And just some of these, the hyperbole, right? Remember when Weirdo Joe said that this was the worst attack on democracy since the Civil War? Remember that? He said that in the State of the Union, right? J6, the worst attack on democracy since the Civil War, quote from our president. He also said, right, here's a clip of Biden saying, we're going to fight, 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 fight. And all the Democrats said, fight, 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 right? And they were screaming about massive attacks and so on, right? So hyperbole they use leads to double standards. For Trump, Trump gets punished, but the Democrats do not. We've talked all about it. Remember when Hillary was complaining about election integrity? Remember when Kamala was complaining about election integrity? Same with Benny Thompson. We talked about the criminal building trespass, the late night Colbert, the Colbert 9, I think it was, right? They're not getting charged with anything. So we've been asking ourselves about these counters and these double standards. And as part of this, one of our big conversations was really about law enforcement and whether law enforcement was negligent, whether they screwed up and they didn't protect the Capitol, or whether this was something that was even more serious. It was nefarious. It was complicit involvement. And the Secret Service, right, there's a story now that they are not getting their text messages. Those text messages are gone. And this has been a big part of Bannon's defense. We're going to hear from him because he was out in front of the court building today after the court proceedings, and he was asking about this, right? Where is all of this missing evidence that might be exculpatory, that might say that there was other stuff happening here? And when you start poking around and you say, I wonder what the Secret Service was doing. We'd like to see their text messages, wouldn't we? Oh, guess what? They're all deleted. And so we'll get into that story. We'll save that here for the end of the... Yeah, here we have... Jenny B's in the house, says worse than the Holocaust. It's true. Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, it's like not something to joke about. Those things, those are horrific tragedies. So to say that this is something that is analogous, right? It's like offensive, right? And we were talking about this with Viva and actually Joe yesterday. If you say that this was the same analog to literally worse than Pearl Harbor, well, a lot of people died on Pearl Harbor. And, it's not quite the same, right? It is sort of diminishing the memory of that event, in my opinion. And I know some liberals they disagree with that. I mean, Jake Tapper thinks it probably was the worst thing since the Civil War. So anyways, now, as I mentioned, we are going to start off with Bannon. We've got a lot of activity here. Bannon trial started. We really left off with day 2 yesterday, and I'm getting really frustrated with the transcripts. Now, look, we had a good run with the Sussman transcript thing, but the transcripts are coming in so late. Actually, I got yesterday's morning transcripts after I got yesterday's PM transcripts, which was about 2 a.m. today. So it's all convoluted. I don't really know what's going on there. It's weird. There's 2 different court reporters who are working on it, and I worked with both of them on the Sussman trial, but there's the courts are different and the judges are different and how they orchestrate their courtrooms. So these transcripts are coming out of order and they're just coming late. Now, I did post them. Okay, so for those of you who are still following along at home, I know many of you are supporting these transcripts, so I'm still buying them, but they are now up and available. The day 1 jury selection, those transcripts are all there. You can see them right here under the day 1 jury selection section, but we really don't need to go through the jury selection transcripts because we have it all laid out here. And we spent all day yesterday on the show talking about it. But today we're going to wrap up with some of the day 2 stuff. I think I may want to spend a quick minute talking about that October 8th issue in the transcript. And so we'll do a little bit of that. But then we'll spend the bulk of the time on today, right? Today was day 3 and the prosecution is done. Prosecution rested their case. We've got 2 witnesses today. We have Kristen Ammerling, who we left off with yesterday. She was the House lawyer, the person who actually drafted the subpoena, which we'll take a look at. And then they brought out FBI agent Stephen Hart. We had direct examinations from both of them. And then we had cross-examinations from Evan Corcoran, which was Bannon's defense lawyer. So we'll get to all of that. Bannon, of course, was giving a statement outside of the court, and something interesting was happening here. But if you'll take a quick look at this, there's somebody interesting in the background, and you may not, I'll leave it here for a quick second. Somebody that we know is back there in the background. We'll see when we get there and watch who that is, because he's standing out there like a sore thumb. We know who it is. All right, so now we've got a lot to get to. You can see if you want to be a part of the show, my friends, the place to do that is over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You can go right here to this web address, click this button, click become a member, and you'll get our morning walk and talks, and you'll get the amazing community over there. And boy, we had just a fascinating conversation today. I'm not gonna tangent off on this today, but I posted about a book that I started to reread this morning it's called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And I posted some screenshots of that book, and the comments that came out in that thread I had to like sit down. When people, they were talking about consciousness and how our consciousness is only a sliver of consciousness. Outstanding. So anyways, if you want to be a part of that, that's over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And my mind literally like cracked this morning when I was reading one of those comments. But also join on YouTube, right? You get the same daily walk and talks there as well, along with some of the other benefits. We have our law firm. I really appreciate it when you think about us. If you happen to know anybody in the state of Arizona that's been charged with a crime, that's what we do, right? All day is we got a whole team of people just churning the gears and grinding away in there, you know, really helping people. And we're extremely passionate about it. We have a lot of fun here on the channel, but you know, this is sort of an extension of our purpose and the work that we do, which is helping and being of service. And so that, my friends, is how you can be a part of the program. But without any further ado, let's get into the content of the day, shall we? And here we are. As I mentioned, we are in day 3 of the Steve Bannon trial. And as a quick reminder, you know, this is a process crime. Okay, we have 2 categories of crimes when we zoom out on this thing. We've got all of these January 6 crimes up here, which is not even what we're talking about. Okay, these were the crimes where there was actual trespass, actual seditious conspiracy, actual maybe assaults on police officers, even though many of these police officers were assaulted. Well, in fact, one of them was assaulted with a water bottle, right? Actually, I think it was the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio. Yeah, the Tarrio indictment, right? Remember, one of these was actually a water bottle. Let's see if I can find it. No, I can't do a search in this thing. But yeah, one of the indictments was actually, yeah, count 4. Here it is. Let's see, conspiracy to prevent, aiding and abetting, count 6, destruction of property. Here, destruction of property, assaulting, right here it is. Yeah, okay. So every time you hear one of these weirdos on Twitter saying they were assaulting police officers, and there were 250 of them assaulting police officers, okay? Here, right, out of those 250, let's say there were 800, and so total criminal charges from J6. About 250 of those were actual assault violent charges. Okay, so about 29% allegedly were the actual violent assault charges. And I was having an email conversation with one of you out there. I won't mention your name, but we were talking through these numbers, right? And take a look at this. This would be categorized as violent because it's assaulting, resisting an officer, right? You see that right there. But if you actually read the charge, right, what is the conduct that they are alleging is so egregious? What are they saying that was assaulting an officer? Well, it's right here. It says right here that they were doing all of this. Ethan, Joseph, Zachary, Enrique, Dominic, they were charged for assaulting. They did forcibly assault any branch of the United States government. How did they do it? You see it right here. By throwing a water bottle at law enforcement. It's right there. That last sentence. You can see I can't mark it up because I'm in the mind map. It's right there. Assault with a water bottle being thrown at law enforcement. So, wow. I guess that's something that, I mean, yeah, I guess you can't take over a country that way. I had no idea. Very, very strange that that is something that was capable. So, okay, again, right, anytime you hear those 250 assault, and I'm not saying that not all of them were that, right? There were obviously not all water bottles. There were some people that were engaged in conduct that I do not condone in any way, shape, or form. But if somebody throws a water bottle and it bounces off 2 police officers who are in full riot gear, that's not assault on an officer. Now, I joke a lot about this. Kelly Sal now on Local says maybe they looked thirsty. Yeah, maybe they wanted to drink. You know, it's January 6th. They're out there protesting all day and they're out there, you know, trying to protect the Capitol. It can be very tiring out there. So, you know, if you now then take those assault with a water bottle violent crimes out of the 250 violent crimes, how many of them were actually violent? And then if you start to extract and extrapolate out from them, all of the feds and FBI agents who were involved, you know, what are there, like 10 guys who were like, got a little bit rowdy on that day? The worst thing since the Civil War? What a bunch of psychos. Okay, so now you can see the point of this conversation is to distinguish between the J6 crimes, which were actual crimes, allegedly, even though several of them involve water bottles. But we also now have the process crimes. Okay, so Bannon was in D.C. at the time, but not at the J6 protest, to my knowledge. And he's being charged with a crime not for throwing water bottles, but for not showing up in front of a fake select committee that doesn't even follow their own rules. And in my opinion, is not even legally constituted. So Bannon now is, you know, having to sort of tread water in the crux of this political onslaught that the prosecution is arguing is not a political onslaught at all. And now the trial is in full swing. So Yesterday, we talked about Steve Bannon on during opening arguments, and Joe Neerman at Good Logic on YouTube, gave us a real great rundown of all the trial proceedings yesterday. And so I'd encourage you to go watch that. But I do want to reference this quick point, and I do want to read a quick part of the transcript, okay? Because I think this is very important, and I think that this is actually a plausible defense, okay? If they can sort of thread this needle tomorrow. Let's see. So I want to spend a minute on it. I don't know if they're going to be presenting a defense tomorrow. I don't know if Bannon's going to testify, or if they're going to call his other lawyer, Costello, or whatever. We're going to see. But this is a very important issue, and so I want to spend a quick minute on it. Okay. Yesterday, remember, the summation of this was that Kristen Ammerling was the first witness in the Bannon trial, and she was the House counsel. Okay. She literally is a lawyer who sort of works for the House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Democrats. And she was the lawyer, the person, the staff member who was helping to draft all of these subpoenas. And remember, they were drafting these gigantic fishing expedition documents going after everybody. Sean Hannity was on the list. Sebastian Gorka was on the list. Okay, they wanted everybody's text messages. I'm joking. I'm waiting for mine. Where's mine? But Kristen Ammerling was explaining that she's typing all these documents up, and she's doing the work, and she's a lawyer, and she's following the House rules, and the House rules are legally constituted. And so she's the drafter of this document. Now, what is this document? It is this one right here. So over at the J6 Mind Map, if you do want to follow along at home, this is the official subpoena that went over to Steve Bannon, care of his lawyer, Robert Costello. And a big part of Bannon's defense was he's relying on his lawyer, right? He didn't have any intent to not comply with the subpoenas. They sent a subpoena over. The prosecution is making the argument that Bannon just took it and just like threw it in the garbage like it was a photo radar ticket. Like, I haven't been served on this yet, so it's garbage. Which may or may not be a valid defense here in the state of Arizona. Call our law firm if you need help with that. But it's something that you sort of are scoffing at. And Bannon saying, that's not true at all. I didn't do that at all, actually. I gave this to my lawyer. I took it very, very seriously because it's a subpoena from Congress. And what I did is I relied on counsel, and counsel relied on the DOJ memoranda. All of these documents came out and said that there was no basis for prosecuting somebody when they were part of the executive branch, and there was executive privilege that was being invoked by the person who owns the privilege, which in this case would have been Donald Trump. So that was the argument, right? Whether you agree with it or not, or whether it's legally true or not, it's called estoppel. They can't prosecute him because Bannon was relying on the prosecutors themselves in order to make a decision about whether and how to respond to this. So it's whether he ignored it or whether he responded to it or took care with it. And he did, he's saying, I did. I gave it to my lawyer. My lawyer gave me advice. That's why I don't have the intent to commit contempt of Congress. And there's another sort of interesting, dynamic here. Bannon, now that he's agreed to testify, right? Maybe he's saying, see, since Donald Trump revoked executive privilege, now I have permission to testify. And we talked about that I think maybe last week or the week before that, when Bannon actually at that final pretrial conference on the day of, or the weekend of that final pretrial, he communicated that he was willing to testify. So I digress. You see here, this is the signature from Benny Thompson. Now, we're going to hear today from Miss Ammerling that Benny just signed this thing, right? He didn't actually type any of this up. He just signed it. They're like, Benny, just sign all these documents. And he's like, well, okay, guess I'll sign them. And they did. He just reads what's on the teleprompter, just like the rest of the committee. Sign the document. He signs it the 23rd day. Now, I've talked about this analogy about, having homework that is due. And if you don't turn it in, right, you kind of fail, right? Like in college, or, your final is on this day. If it's not due, you're done. In law, right? In the law, your motions are due this day or you're done. Like if you got 14 days to file an appeal on day 15, you're done. Sorry. There's basically no way to get, past that rule. So the same concept applies, right? If your teacher says it's due on Monday, it better be due on Monday. But if you show up on Monday and you don't have your homework in, and the teacher says, well, that's okay. I'm kind of mad at you, but you can bring it tomorrow or the next week or whenever, really. I mean, I don't, whatever. Then was it really a deadline? Was that really the homework deadline on Monday? Not really, because there were no consequences. And that's essentially what they're arguing. You see these two dates here going out in the subpoena saying, Bannon, you got to show up here and bring documents on October 7th and do it again with your testimony on October 14th. Now, the problem with this is after Bannon. So here's what the actual subpoena looks like. Okay, we ran through a little bit of this yesterday, but this letter was the letter that was written by Miss Ammerling. She says, pursuant to the authorities here in HR 503, which says it should have 13 members, and it doesn't. It only has 9, so it's their violation of their own rules right there. But it says it hereby transmits a subpoena compelling you to show up on the 7th and the 14th. Now, as we talked about in a previous show, Bannon didn't show up on the 7th, and the committee sent a letter back to him on the 8th, and they said, hey, we noticed you didn't show up on the 7th, and now we've got a problem with you. But they didn't have a hard line. They weren't saying that he was out of compliance, right? They just sort of said, we look forward to getting the documents when you can get them to us, and then we'll be able to dive in there. So I wanted to show you a little bit. I know we haven't done a lot of transcript reading here on the show, but yesterday morning, this was the conversation about that issue. And here is the conversation about the letter, all right? So let me do this. Let me pull this one open, and I'll just read some of this real quickly so that you can see sort of what the judge is playing with on this topic. And we're going to see if the Bannon defense gets into any of this tomorrow. I'm not sure that he will, but it is going to be something that will be worth investigating. So let me now open this with a different piece of software so that I can mark it up and we can color all over it. Now, this is from day 2. It's from the morning, but it is, I think, relevant because this is what Bannon's going to be talking about largely tomorrow. All right, so here we go. This is the document, and let me scroll this out just a little bit over here. We're going to get our red pen, and we're going to take a quick look at the conversation that was starting yesterday morning. Judge and the court says, good morning, everybody. And we got the juror set, right? Everybody was seated. He said, so here's what I want to do, but before we get all of this completed. I want to talk about some of these letters, questions around the letters. At least briefly, we've got to get into this and see where we land, because as Ms. Vaughn indicated, this could have some issues. This could have some problems with testimony. So the judge now this is Judge Nichols. He's saying, okay, so the prosecutor's sitting over here. The defense is sitting over here. It's bright early in the morning. We're talking about that October 9th, that October 8th letter. Bannon doesn't show up on the 7th. They send him a letter on the 8th saying, you're kind of in default, but not really. Like your homework's late, but kind of not really. And so the judge is saying, okay, we got to talk about this now, because if this whole letter goes in front of the jury, then there's a lot in there, right? There's all sorts of political stuff in there. And a lot of this stuff the government wanted to keep out. They wanted to say, you can't make this political. You can't talk about this stuff. So then Bannon's lawyers are saying, well, if you're introducing that letter, then I get to talk about that letter and what I thought about that letter. And that allows me to provide a bunch of additional defenses. So the judge is saying, okay, we got to really flush this puppy out. Okay, so Miss Vaughn, you're sitting over there, you're pregnant. And Mr. Schoen, you're over there, you're not pregnant. Let's hash this out. So the court says, Judge Nichols presiding, he says, all right, everybody, hold on a minute here. I need to take an example of this thing. Okay, so Government Exhibit 5, right? Pull up the exhibit. I think that is the October 8th letter to Robert Costello, right? That's the letter that we're talking about. That's your homework was due, but you're late letter. The judge says, okay, well, as I understand it, Miss Prosecutor, Miss Vaughn, the United States argument is that this letter is not offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but rather to provide notice to Mr. Bannon that the committee's position was you had to show up, and it's actually not even, it doesn't even fit within the definition of hearsay at all. And therefore, Ms. Vaughn, you don't have to think about whether there's a hearsay exception, right? And so this is really, really, like technical stuff. And remember, when we've talked about hearsay, and for those of you who followed the Depp trial, I did not, but I know that there was like a meme on that trial. Everything was hearsay, right? I didn't watch the trial, but I saw all the memes. And hearsay is complicated. There's hearsay, and then there's things that are hearsay, but we have exceptions because we still think that those are reliable statements. And then we have things that are just like not called hearsay, but they really look like hearsay, and they're just not hearsay. So it's one of the most convoluted areas of the law. And it's really hard to sort of unpack, especially on the fly, which is why you see even, some of the most high-paid lawyers in the country, have difficulties with it. So the judge is now unpacking it, and the prosecutor says, exactly, Judge, exactly. I don't need to talk about hearsay or any exceptions. We're just going to, you nailed it. So the court says, and remember, Joe said that this judge is like the top alpha. He didn't use that language, but right. He said he was very competent. He was controlling the courtroom. He had sort of his expertise was demonstrable in a way that was clearly head and shoulders above everybody else, all the other lawyers in the room. So the court says, all right, If that's true, Miss Vaughn, my first question is, why isn't it being offered for the truth of the matter that this, in fact, was the committee's position? Right? So the letter says something. You're trying to introduce it as evidence that the committee had a position, but why is this not offered for the truth of the matter that this is the committee's position? He says, so Vaughn comes out. Now she's like, all right, Judge, okay. Complicated stuff here. Vaughn says, okay, Your Honor, look, if we think about what the elements of the offense are, okay, which is contempt of Congress, not showing up, it's that first he violated the subpoena. The subpoena is the subpoena, right, which is that document that we just looked at. It has the dates on it. So sort of separating these two documents out, right, the letter and then the actual subpoena. Then we have to show that the violation was willful. So on its face, the subpoena demands compliance, right? The violation was willful. The subpoena of its own, if you look at the subpoena, it says show up on the 7th, show up on the 14th. But Vaughn says, but to the extent that under cases like Flaxer and Quinn, if there is an outstanding objection or a question that's made to the committee before defiance and the committee doesn't resolve it, that goes to the defendant's intent to willfully defy the subpoena. So the court says, okay, all right, so that's interesting. So what I understand why you think it's probative, but okay, so then my question is, why isn't the letter being offered to prove that the committee was taking these positions? That's the truth of the matter. I mean, isn't that, you're saying it's not offered for the truth of the matter. It kind of sounds like it is. Well, okay. So Vaughn says, all right, well, the committee's ultimate position really isn't even relevant, Judge. It doesn't even matter what they say about any of this. Any of their position, Benny's position, it doesn't matter at all. Only thing that really matters is the subpoena had to show up on the 7th and the 14th. These letters are relevant now, saying they want this letter in. They're relevant to show that the defendant understood that he had not been excused from the subpoena and that to the extent he had raised a valid objection, the committee had resolved it. Okay, so in other words, the subpoena is being used to prove the dates and to prove the violations, but the letter is being used to prove state of mind and Bannon's intent. So they're two separate things. And the court says, okay, I understand where you're going with this. And so Vaughn says, in his mind. So the judge, okay, now I got it. Hang on a minute. The judge says, okay, so now that I've got this, and this is what the judge does, right? The judge is going to basically be asking both sides to explain and defend their positions. And the judge is going to take like a string of a guitar. They're going to sort of tune their guitar. And the judge is going to pull that string like way hard. And he's going to see if it clangs, right? Slap that back. And he's going to see how that sounds. And if it still sounds good, like if that still sounds like it's within the law, they're going to allow that to go forward. But the judge is like really pulling on these things. And people haven't tuned their guitars for that. He's taking these variables and he's yanking them back and forth. So the judge says accordingly, he says, all right, thanks for explaining that, Ms. Vaughn. So now let's assume that these are not hearsay, right? As you say. These are proving Bannon's mind. They're not being offered to prove the committee's position. It says there are a number of statements in all of the letters, right? It's a big letter. We talked about Benny's fishing expeditions of the government's exhibits, or at least the letters from the committee and Bannon's letters. He says, why is the government's notice of those, of the committee's providing notice to Bannon, relevant in this trial now? Why is it now relevant? Oh, yeah. So she has to defend this now. Vaughn says, well, Judge, look, it's not relevant to the extent of what the merits of privilege are and whether to assert it, but it is relevant to show that the objection he perhaps raised had been addressed. Okay, so again, another sort of part of the analysis. One, it's like we're connecting chain links together. One of the links is that Bannon got the letter and didn't do anything with it, right? And they're saying, no, he had to show up and they have to show all this sort of connection, connect the dots, one dot to the next. But by the time we get to the letter, what the prosecutor is saying is we've already resolved most of those things. Bannon raised his objection and Benny Thompson's letter responds to those objections. Like, hey, we know you didn't show up on the 7th. We know you think you've got executive privilege. We know you think that you don't have to be here. I'm telling you right now, I'm Benny Thompson, this letter being written by Amerling. I'm telling you, you have to be here. You have to show up and be here. And that's what this letter is being offered to prove from the prosecutor. So the court says, okay, so now let's pull on one of those strings a little bit. Had been resolved, and therefore one would argue the date was not flexible, right? So he can't move those dates around. Bannon is saying, I didn't have a homework due date. You said the 7th, but then on the 8th, you didn't really penalize me. So that wasn't really a date. It was fluid. So the judge says, okay, so then one would say that the date was not flexible. Or I think from the government's perspective, as Ms. Vaughn, you would say that this letter goes to whether the committee had taken a full and final position on all of Bannon's reasons for not showing up, right? So the letter is saying, we took your excuses and we don't believe it. Having taken a full and final position on all of these reasons, he could not have thought, in fact, that the mens rea, there it is, and in fact, the date was not moved. So they're saying this has nothing to do with the dates of when Bannon needed to show up. The letter is rebutting all of Bannon's claims that he thought the date was going to move around. So the judge is explaining this back to the prosecutor, and she says, right, exactly, Judge, you got it. There's no other communications to the defendant about the dates outside of the subpoena. Okay, they didn't say it wasn't on the 7th, therefore we're going to move it to the 25th. They didn't give him an extension, so he was in violation at that time. So these letters are just about, did the defendant raise an objection and was it resolved? Right, that's it. That's why they want the letter to come in. Bannon raised an objection and the committee said, invalid objection. Judge says, okay. So then from the committee's perspective, what you're saying, Ms. Vaughn, the letters from the committee to Bannon and their discussions of privilege, that's all going to go to the jury. Is the government's view that Mr. Bannon's letters back are admissible in their entirety for the same reason? Like, so if the prosecutors want to introduce the government's letter that came from Benny Thompson's assistant, can we also introduce the letters that Bannon sent back to the same committee? And the government says, so Mr. Bannon's letters back are admissible. Yeah. And the government offers them. Court says, yes, I'm talking about when Bannon offers them to show that in his view, things are still being negotiated, right? Bannon was saying there was no hard date on the 7th. They sent me a letter back and they said, well, the 7th date, we kind of wanted it, but you didn't give it to us and we're not all that mad, because that was Bannon's letter on the 8th. It didn't say, you're failing the class. In other words, it said, we'll continue. And it did say this. It said, we'll continue to accept your documents. We still sort of require you to bring them to us. Bannon is saying that means this was negotiable. It wasn't a hard deadline. His homework was not due on the 7th. He was taking the position that the privilege issues were important. And that was one of the reasons he believed the dates were not set in stone, right? I can't come and talk to you because I'm working through this executive privilege issue with Trumpo. Prosecutor says, okay, yeah, so he would be offering them, I don't think it's ultimately an issue. And the court says to show that he provided them notice, right? So he is communicating back now with the committee. Remember, one of Vaughn's opening arguments that we heard about from Joe was that she was saying this was not political. And really the theme of the government's case was that Bannon just ignored the subpoena, right? He just came in, he's like, Liz Cheney, get out of here. And he just threw it right in the garbage. But the court is saying, oh, that's not really true, right? I mean, he sent letters like back and forth. And so if you introduce your letter, Bannon's going to get to introduce his letter, right? She says, yeah, the government is offering them. And so we'll put those in evidence. Okay, so they will be in evidence, says the judge. All right, got it. So what that means, says the judge, is that we will have letters and evidence from the government's perspective that discuss the party's privilege. And okay, so that sounds good. How do I ensure the jury doesn't get confused about all those discussions when they're, as we know, I've held that at least most executive privileges issues are irrelevant as to mens rea or entrapment by estoppel and the like, right? This is the judge explaining that he basically eviscerated all of Bannon's defenses. Right? So I already said we don't get to talk about executive privilege as to Bannon's mental state. He can't say that, right? He can't say that I was not showing up because of executive privilege. The judge already said not relevant or not allowed. It's limited by the motions in limine. Same thing with entrapment by estoppel, right? This was that Bannon is relying on the DOJ. Can't talk about that. So he says, well, what, if anything, should I do to ensure that the jury doesn't look at these letters and say, since he didn't let any of those things in, what if the jurors say, wait a second, we didn't really hear anything about privilege and this letter is talking all about privilege. So what the heck? Like there's a missing piece of the puzzle here. Is there a valid privilege here? He's sort of talking about the juries. Is he excused from testifying because of privilege? Like what if the jurors get confused about all this because they're expecting, we say, here's a whole sandwich, but there's no meat in there. They're going, what is this, a veggie? This is terrible. Ms. Vaughn says, okay, well, judge, look, in the court's proposed instructions to the jury, it includes an instruction saying that the defendant's belief or reliance on the law or a privilege is not a defense. So we're going to deal with that in jury instructions. That's why the jurors are not going to get confused. To the extent the court has concerns about confusion, you can add some additional instructions in there if you want. And the court says, oh, should I give a limiting instruction from the government's perspective? Do you think I should? Assuming I allow the letter in, but I'm concerned about this. And Vaughn says, The court continues, should I propose a limiting, or should I think about a limiting instruction when the letters are offered, presumably today? Do you want me to do that today? Vaughn says, well, the jury instructions along the lines of something like, you're going to see, tell the jurors, they're not going to be confused. Just tell them something like this. Tell them, you're going to see reference to executive privilege. You're not to consider what that means or what it required. But these letters, and the judge picks up, he said, okay, got it. So these letters are being offered only for the purpose of demonstrating that the committee was providing notice, that's it, to Bannon, of its positions on the subpoena, and to the extent the letters discuss issues around privilege, you're not to consider the merits of those questions. Is that what you're saying, Ms. Vaughn? She says, yes. Yeah, exactly right. You got it, Judge. I don't think the government would have an objection to that. I don't have any issues with that. Sounds good to me. And especially if we also added in something like they're also offered to show the committee's position with respect to the reasons the defendant had raised for not complying, right? Court says, got it. All right, Ms. Vaughn, thank you. Got it. So, right, you can see here that Bannon really has very little, and the prosecution is going to be keeping all of that precluded so that Bannon really has very little arguments to make. Court says, okay, got it. So we'll limit all of this when it goes in front of the judge. And this is all based on those pretrial rulings, right? These were all of the motions in limine that we discussed weeks ago. So the court says, okay, thank you, Ms. Vaughn. And she says, and also, and not to show their position, but to show the defendant has been notified of as far as, and the court says, yes, I understood. I got it. Stop running your mouth. I got it. Thank you. Turns over to Mr. Schoen. Mr. Schoen, you're up. Okay, and this is the defense. This is Bannon's defense lawyer. So now he chimes in on this issue. He says, good morning, Your Honor. Court says, good morning. Mr. Schoen takes the stand and he says, look, Judge, I got to tell you this right now. There's absolutely no reason for these letters to come in other than their hearsay value, all right? They have no independent relevance that's admissible in the case whatsoever. It's not just that they're inadmissible hearsay. It's the worst kind in this case. The court has barred Mr. Bannon from telling his side of the story in this case, and the jury is going to hear accordingly. They're going to hear that Bannon, according to the government at least, Mr. Bannon got a subpoena and didn't show up. Remember, we heard from day one, that's all we have to show, Judge. He got a subpoena and he didn't show up. That's what she said. Bannon has a full story for why he didn't show up, all right? It's not that simple. It was advice of counsel. The invocation of executive privilege. Those were two key reasons why he didn't show up. So don't make it sound like he just overslept that morning. Questions about its validity, its breadth, and so on. His reliance on the DOJ. That's the estoppel argument. All of these defenses in his story of the case have been barred by the court at the government's request. And so now to put letters in that include statements like, the information sought directly serves a legitimate legislative purpose, right? The letter was a propaganda piece, essentially. It was sort of the Bannon people saying, we're justified. This is why we're amazing. This is why this is all legitimate. Please respond, right? The audience was not for Bannon. The audience was for America. And so they've said in there, right? So it's dripping with propaganda, essentially. And what Bannon's defense lawyers are saying is, hold on a minute, right? If we shove this letter in front of them, they're going to see this. And so the court says, all right, well, look, that is still an issue in this case. And he says, and it is within the scope of the delegated authority of the committee, and Mr. Bannon's information here is of critical importance. So the judge says, look, I haven't barred testimony about that question, what you just referred to, and I don't know which one he's talking about there. I've discussed things about mens rea and entrapment by estoppel, but pertinency is still an issue in this case. Schoen says the court has found that we are not allowed to litigate legislative purpose, Judge. Your Honor said the Court of Appeals already determined this, and he said, purpose, but not pertinency. Schoen says, this doesn't deal with pertinency, Your Honor. Court says all the documents relate directly to the inquiry being conducted by the committee. Why isn't that pertinency? Okay, that's pertinency, says the defense. How about rejecting executive privilege? How about all those other things? Court says, yeah, focus on that, right? The court says, yeah, focus on that. You'll have a better luck with that. So Schoen says, how about rejecting executive privilege, Judge? You rejected that. So the jury is going to hear from a story from these letters that why executive privilege in Chairman Thompson's opinion doesn't apply. If it's applied, it wasn't validly invoked. We've never heard from President Trump himself, according to this letter. And so all of those things. And so ultimately, if we kind of fast forward on this, My understanding is the court ultimately lets it in. And so let's see if we can fast forward here. We wrap it up. The court has one final question for Mr. Schoen. He says, all right, Mr. Schoen, if this letter said the return date on the subpoena was for X date, we never extended that date. We expect you to show up on that day. Like, let's say hypothetically, that's what the subpoena said. Said, no extensions, final deadline. You better be here on the subpoena, right? Not in the letter. And the committee says, or the government says, we're offering that letter not to prove the truth of the matter, but to prove that Bannon knew the return date hadn't moved, right? Not to prove that he needed to be there on the day, but that the return date hadn't moved. Two issues. That the committee's position, he says, would that be inadmissible hearsay? Would that be irrelevant evidence in your case? He's trying to draw distinctions between Schoen's position. And he says, Your Honor, in my view, with an instruction that the portion, we've never extended this date, shouldn't be considered for the truth. And that's why I say from the beginning, I think the date of the letter and maybe the last paragraph should come in this case, given what the defenses are. Right. And so we go back and forth. And when we scroll back down, let's see if we can get a ruling out of this. And you see, this was the debate that was taking place all morning yesterday. And a lot of people in the media were sort of killing themselves over this because they were saying it was just like, pulling teeth while they were debating all of this stuff back and forth, because they're really going through the letter, verbatim, one like sort of sentence by sentence. And we have different proffers that are being discussed, and so on. Now, we'll fast forward to that, past that, but that was a very important issue. And I want to go back to and show you now what's taking place in day 3, because we're picking back up now with more Kristen Ammerling. And Kristen Ammerling, of course, is the House lawyer. So when we get to day 3, I do not have transcripts yet, because as I mentioned at the start of the show, these transcripts are a little bit delayed for whatever reason. But we do have some very nice Twitter threads, and I have 2 of them that I want to go through today. Today, we're going to be checking in with John Haughey, which is over at the Epoch Times, which is a great news site. He's a U.S. Navy veteran, University of Wyoming graduate, working journalist, 1978. National affairs reporter, and he gives us a little bit of good meat and potatoes on some of the heavy lifting that took place this morning. Remember, the transcripts we just read about yesterday was yesterday, or just now was the transcript from yesterday. And here we've got now John Haughey, who's going to give us some more of the heavy lifting that took place this morning. Then we're going to check in with Miss Sarah Lynch, who says, greetings from Steve Bannon, day 3. She also does an awesome job. We've followed her many times. She works for Reuters, and she covers U.S. Justice Department news. And it's kind of hard to tell what her politics are, which means it's good stuff. But okay, John Haughey is here. Now, he's over at the court building, and I know Joe was there and other people whose names we can't say here, but they were there. And on day 3, John Haughey says, Bannon, set now out of the East Perriman Bartlett U.S. District Court. Chief Counsel Kristen Ammerling is on the stand. Now, early this morning, we heard that much of the proceedings were focused on jury selection, and the prosecution really wanted that letter in, right? That October 8th letter in. The defense ultimately agreed to have the letters entered in their entirety, so all of that other language in, because what they're arguing is that it opened the door to Bannon understanding or you being able to use privilege and these negotiations as the trial proceeds forward, right? So all of that conversation that we had, those letters coming in their entirety. Now, after Ammerling finishes testifying, but before Amanda Vaughn, Bannon's lawyers are now having a conversation about how they can approach the cross-examination. Schoen is in court, and he says, Your Honor, Benny Thompson is the person who should be called, not Ammerling. Benny Thompson is the chairman of this committee. He should be here. He's the person who signed the subpoena in the first place, right? Why is he not here testifying? We asked for subpoenas previously, and Judge, you denied them. You're not allowing us to go and get our own witnesses. How can we possibly conduct a fair trial if we don't even have witnesses? Saying that Benny Thompson was the one who made decisions. Ammerling was not. She just drafted it and then gave it to Benny to sign. The statement here, Nichols, the judge, he says, look, if the witness's testimony opens the door to those issues, that makes it relevant, and I'm open to privilege arguments. When she's done, when Ammerling is off the stand, we can take up what the extent of these letters can be. So the trial proceeds. Now, Haughey tells us that today the proceedings begin with a 22-minute debate again between defense attorneys and Nichols about turning this thing into a political circus, because Bannon has been out after these proceedings and he's actually been sort of talking to the media, right? And he was scolding the media and scolding Benny Thompson. So the judge now is entertaining arguments from both sides. So the prosecutor now is up. Amanda Vaughn comes to the podium and says, look, Judge, when we're done here with Miss Amerling, there should not be one question about the political motivations of Thompson. Amerling is up there for a direct exam. We're going to be asking her questions. When we're done, Bannon and his lawyers, they better not ask one question about the political motivations of Benny Thompson. There shouldn't be one question about whether the House of Representatives is politically motivated at all, right? So even though Miss Amerling, as we heard from yesterday, talked about the January 6th insurrection as being like the end of America, Joe said she was very dramatic about it. And it was very, a tragedy she started off that day. But now the prosecutor is saying, my direct examination, it cannot be cross-examined. It cannot be challenged on the basis that this is a political hit job. The judge says, okay, so you agree, though, that Bannon can attempt to show that she's biased? Like maybe it's not political, but she's biased, right? The question is, what is fair game for this witness? What can we go and hit Amerling with? The prosecutor is trying to stop Bannon and his defense lawyers from cross-examining her on certain questions. So the judge then goes over to Evan Corcoran, who's Bannon's defense lawyer, and he says, all right, so Mr. Corcoran, do you agree that cross-examination here could be limited to the bias of the witness? I mean, whether the witness is biased, it can only be limited to that. Do you agree with that? Corcoran says, well, look, Judge, our cross-examination of Amerling, it's going to depend on the testimony of the witness. In terms of her bias, we are certainly allowed to ask her anything that would bear on her culpability, and while adjudicating the credibility of the witness. So he just kind of a standard answer there. Yeah, we can ask about credibility. Yeah, Judge, we certainly can. And he also says, I got to bring up the Sixth Amendment and the confrontation clause. He says, under the Sixth Amendment right to confrontation, cross-examination can get at the actions taken by anyone being presented through the witness. We need to have the ability to do that, Judge. And so what we can do that without without crossing the line of fair examination. So the defense is saying, we can handle it. We can go after bias. We're allowed to do it. And we can do it without getting into some of the things that you said are outside of the hula hoop, right? There were some things they can't get into. So the judge says, okay, thank you, Mr. Corcoran. Are you saying that you should be allowed to ask the witness about the bias of the committee then? Like you just said that you should be asked about the bias. Do you think you can talk about the committee? And he says, well, did the chairman do X because of this issue? Like as an example, he says, certainly. Yeah, this witness can get at that. Did she know the motivations of Thompson? He says, yeah, that's totally fair game, Judge. I can ask all day about that. The judge says, all right, well, let me think about this. Hold on a minute. And he rubs his chin and he says, okay, here's my ruling. The defense may ask questions if the witness was biased, but may not ask if anyone else was biased in actions they took outside this courthouse. Do you see the distinction there? So saying you can ask Miss Amerling whether you're biased, but not ask Miss Amerling whether Benny Thompson is biased or whether the January 6th committee is biased because they're too far removed, right? And she's now off sort of speculating and offering speculation about all this stuff. And so he's not going to be allowed to do that. The defense now can ask if Amerling's actions cross the line, and I will police that line. Okay. So Vaughn then says, all right, hold on, Judge, because some of the members of Congress, look, Judge, I disagree with this because some members of Congress didn't want this prosecuted. Remember, right, there was a vote on some of this stuff. That is not evidence that there was not a crime. 203 GOP members, U.S. representatives, voted against the resolution to cite Bannon with contempt. And the prosecution is saying Bannon shouldn't be allowed to talk about that. That has nothing to do with anything here. Just because some people think he didn't commit a crime doesn't mean that he didn't commit a crime, right? Every criminal defendant often thinks, I didn't commit a crime, and their friends are sitting there, no, you didn't do anything wrong, right? And that's not enough. Just because the 203 GOP members said no doesn't mean it's true, says the prosecutor. So then they conclude, the judge says, I'll police that line. That's going to be the ruling. Just leave it there. Fine, Judge. All right, we're going to recall Amerling to the stand. She comes back for day 2. And remember, Amerling is the House lawyer, and it's a woman who looks like this. Actually, that is Miss Amerling. So not like that. That is Amerling. She looks exactly like that, I guess. It's true. Here, Amerling now takes the stand. And Vaughn, the government prosecutor, is back up there asking questions. Her response sound mundane, and her queries are basically political. She are political civics lessons, right? Saying that there was an administrative subpoena, the process are being closely monitored, and so on. And so now let's jump over actually to Miss Lynch, who I think gives some more color on some of this. And this is where there was a conversation earlier in the morning where Amanda Vaughn was screaming about this being a political hit job and so on and so forth. There's the ruling from Nichols. But he says here, he's not going to rule yet on the extent of the questioning that can be conducted. And we have another witness coming up after Amerling. It's going to be an FBI special agent. The judge, the big headline of the day was this here. The judge says, quote, "I do not intend for this to become a political case, a political circus." And everybody said, oh gosh, this judge is really mad at Bannon because he's a political clown, right? And that's kind of where this is going. This is the judge scolding Bannon to not let this turn into a political circus. Okay. I'm not sure that's what he meant there, but I see what people are saying about it, right? He's talking about the politics coming into the courtroom, not necessarily Bannon's statements outside of court, which is how much of the media was portraying it. So Sarah Lynch then says, the questioning resumes with Amerling. They're zeroing in on the language in the letter accompanying the subpoena, which was warning of criminal liability if you don't show up, right? The subpoena, Bannon, it's got the two deadlines on there. If you don't show up, possible criminal prosecution. Amerling is asked about, Miss Amerling, why did Steve Bannon get a subpoena? Why did he get it? And the judge says, hold on there. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, before she answers that question, please do not take these reasons as facts. They're just reasons why it was issued, but it's not proven, and we're not on trial for those reasons. Amerling is going over all the different kinds of documents that she requested. Now they're talking about emails. Amerling and Bannon's lawyers are actually sending emails back and forth. Okay, so the jury is hearing this now, and the jury is realizing that it's not like Bannon just took this and flushed it down the toilet when it landed on his desk. He's sending emails back and forth between Amerling and his lawyers. Vaughn asked Amerling if the committee ever heard from Bannon after Bannon's attorney confirmed to her in a September 24th email that he was authorized to accept service from the subpoena. Right, so they send the subpoena. Costello responds on the 24th. I'm authorized to accept service, and then no more conversation. Did he ever ask for an extension, says Vaughn? He did not, says Amerling. Did he ever inform the committee that he did not have responsive documents? Like, did he say, I don't have what you're looking for? He did not, says Amerling. Vaughn, then, the prosecutor, shows Robert Costello's letter to the committee claiming that Bannon could not comply with the subpoena due to executive privilege. Miss Amerling, says Miss Vaughn, you see this letter here? And it says that there was executive privilege. You're a lawyer and you work for the House. What did you think about that? She says, well, the select committee, our position on that was that was not a valid rationale for refusing to comply. And we just decided, we don't like that. So you still have to show up. And so now they show that October 8th letter that we spent a ton of time talking about this letter from the January 6th committee to Costello, warning that Bannon's refusal to comply had no legal basis and a failure to comply would be deemed willful, right? And that was all in the letter. We read through it previously. The letter also instructs Bannon to provide a privilege log identifying specific documents that he thinks should be withheld. So they're sort of giving Bannon in the document like an excuse, right? An exception. Provide everything that we wanted, and you can detail what you're not giving us. Bannon said no. They go on a brief break, and we fast forward, and we're back. They are showing now Costello's October 13th letter to the committee, reiterating his refusal to testify absent an agreement between Trump and the committee and or a court order, right? Bannon saying, I'm not coming there. I know you want me to be there on the 14th. I'm not going to be there. Here's my letter on October 13th confirming. He said Bannon would, quote, revisit his position if those conditions were met. right? So Bannon is now saying, look, I don't have any intent to sort of, his argument is, I don't have any intent to not comply with the subpoena or show up in front of the committee, but I can't. There is executive privilege. I'm willing to testify, but I need to have certain conditions met. Hit me back up when that happens. Now, Costello did ask for a week-long adjournment in light of the pending litigation between the committee and Trump. His letter did not specifically ask for any delay or any extension to the deadline subpoenas, says Ammerling, right? So what the prosecutor is doing is trying to take some of the pain out of this cross-examination when it does come up. He says, Miss Ammerling, he didn't ask for a clear extension, right? Did he do anything else to try to sort of push this back a little bit? And she says, yeah, well, he did ask for a week-long adjournment, like a motion to continue. He's asked for several continuances. And in one of those, he said that there was pending litigation. And he needed to have this stuff sorted out. So that's sort of, right, communicating. That's good. That's good, pretty good testimony, I think, for Bannon, to be honest. You know, it's communicating that he is communicating about the subpoena. He's not ignoring it. And based on some of the brief introductory, overviews that we have of opening arguments, it seems like the theme is not quite that, right? The theme of the case is that Bannon just threw this right in the dumpster, and that's not the reality of what happened. Even Ammerling herself, the government's own witness, is communicating this fact, saying that Bannon's lawyer was sending emails back and forth, now also trying to sort of seize upon or take the sting. This is called drawing the sting, right? Draw the sting, get stung, and so that you can go out and sort of move beyond it, get the painful stuff out of the way quickly. They're doing that here. They're saying that Bannon, yeah, he kind of did ask for a continuance. He did ask for an adjournment, a week-long adjournment, but he didn't specifically ask for any delays, right? Okay, so he did want a little bit more time, but not specifically mentioned in his letter, right? Yes. Cross-examination now starts. So Ammerling is done. Amanda Vaughn sits back down. And Evan Corcoran takes the podium. He says, hi, Miss Ammerling. Hi. Great. Defense lawyer. Miss Ammerling, is the committee still receiving and reviewing documents right now? She says, yes, it is. Okay. Here's what I'd like to know, Miss Ammerling. You drafted the subpoena, right? You wrote that document? Yeah. And were any members of Congress present when you signed the proof of service of the subpoena? Were there any Congress people present when you signed that letter? Amanda Vaughn is just sitting there. She goes, objection! And the judge overrules it. Now you're overruled. Sit back down. She cannot recall who was around. Oh, isn't that convenient? Was Benny Thompson in the room with you, Ammerling? Objection. You can answer that. I don't recall. Yeah, right. Sort of strange question by Corcoran, says Sarah. Is the subpoena form filled out by computers or a typewriter? You do this on a computer or a typewriter. And she says, a computer. Weirdo. So, that's not in the transcript here, but I'm just making that up. But Corcoran then, the defense lawyer, gets up there and asks who made the decision on the subpoena deadline dates, right? You drafted this subpoena, Miss Ammerling. You got all these documents here. Who put this October 7th deadline? How did you come up with that date and the 14th date? She says, well, the decision for those things, those are outside of my pay grade. That's way above what I'm qualified to do. And so those go to Chairman Benny Thompson. Oh, Benny Thompson, huh? So Benny Thompson set the deadlines for Bannon, right? And she says, yeah. The staff discusses it, but the ultimate decision is made by Benny Thompson. I mean, he has the authority to sign the document. So he decided on that and says, I can speak to the general process on this whole thing, but honestly, I cannot recall specific individuals. There's only 9 of them. Not even 13, according to their rules. She can't remember 9 people. But it would have been my senior staff, including myself, discussing the different considerations and making the different recommendations to the committee about the appropriate dates. So the judge is sitting there. He's miffed. He's like, ugh. Corcoran is showing Ammerling an 8-page document trying to jog her memory, but he doesn't want to direct her to a page or a paragraph. He's saying, okay, take a look at this thing here. And the judge says, can you direct her to a specific area? He's like, no, it's there, right, Judge? I want to refresh her recollection. He said, well, it's 8 pages. So I can't tell her where to go. And he says, yes, you can. You control the pages. Tell her what page it's on. So then Corcoran says, all right, Miss Ammerling, did you tell the FBI that you had filled out the proof of service before the subpoena was served? Right? There's a document when you serve a subpoena, you got to make sure they actually got it. A subpoena is to make sure somebody knows about a process that's happening against them, right? You got to be like, if you're being sued, you want to know you're being sued, and you don't want the other party to say they know they're being sued and they don't know they're being sued, and then they win because you don't show up to court. So they send a subpoena, and the point is, right, that it's supposed to confirm and be legitimate that that other person has actual notice. So they're getting into that. Did you fill out the proof of service before it was actually served? Did you confirm that they got the documents before it happened? Because that means that it's not actually served, right? So it's not actually a valid subpoena, right? She says, I don't remember. I don't see it referred to here. I don't recall discussing that issue. I don't know if I filled it out before I served it. Okay. Corcoran was reading from the committee's deposition rules, and just as he appeared to suggest that the panel failed to provide copy of a rule, the judge said, stop right there. Sidebar. So he's trying to get into the committee's deposition rules and about how subpoenas work and all this stuff. And the judge says, Evan, stop it. Come up here. So the prosecutors and the defense go up there, and he says something to them. And they turn on the white noise. Psh, we can't hear anything. And they go back down to the podium. They're back. Seems like the judge shut him down mightily quick. Said, Evan, buddy boy, don't you even think about going into that. I told you you can't. So now Corcoran then gets back up and he's doing his cross-examination, saying, all right, Miss Ammerling, did Benny Thompson actually draft the letter, this letter that we already showed you the letter? Did he actually draft it? She says, I can't recall. Don't you love this letter? It's like this lady's like so busy with all the January 6th stuff. She can't even remember it because there's so many January 6s. Can't recall, but notes as a general matter, staff usually drafts the letter and it gets signed off on. Okay, in other words, Ammerling writes it, Benny signs it, hopefully after he read it. Corcoran asks if the document and the list on Bannon's subpoena, if it's individualized or if it's similar to everybody else. Is this just a big document, you just like a template? You just send it out to everybody? She explains that these lists are not a carbon copy of one another, right? This is actually individualized to Steve Bannon. So we sort of take a break. It's lunchtime. The judge says, all right, Corcoran. So the judge allows Corcoran to ask if the House rules were provided to Bannon as required for subpoena recipients. She said no, because he never showed up. Okay. Interesting. So that's interesting. So it's a technical argument. So Corcoran is saying the House has rules for delivering subpoenas. You say you delivered a legitimate subpoena. In your subpoena, I've got two challenges to your subpoena. It might be that you signed it, that it was properly served before it was actually served, which means you're a liar and you signed a document before it was true. Or number two, the House rules say that you have to give him a copy of the House rules when you serve him a subpoena so he knows what to do, like the rules. Did you do that? And she says, no, I didn't, because he never showed up. Right. So maybe the defense is arguing that the subpoena was not validly executed at all, making the argument that the House rules require the subpoena to be delivered with a copy of the rules. It was not done that way. Therefore, it is invalid. Interesting defense. The response by the government and why she has an answer to this is she's saying the House rules don't require me to give them a copy of the House rules with a subpoena, but only when they show up as a consequence of the subpoena, right? So Bannon didn't need to get the House rules when his lawyer got the subpoena. Bannon was going to get the rules when he showed up in court. And we don't know. Yeah, she said, no, he never showed up, right? So you're seeing how they're splitting that. Corcoran is trying to get Ammerling to admit the subpoena deadlines are often up for negotiation, but she's not biting, saying, do these things kind of move around? Like if it's the 7th, sometimes people give you stuff on the 8th. She's not entertaining it at all. She says, All right, Evan. When witnesses are cooperating with the committee and they indicate that they're willing to testify, it isn't unusual to have some back and forth about the date when they will appear. She just adds it is unusual for a witness to just refuse to appear, which is what she's saying Bannon did. So then Corcoran says, well, I need to know about Benny Thompson. Do you know, did he write any single lines in this letter? Did he write one sentence in here? She repeats the process. She says, look, the way that we do this, when the staff writes letters, then the committee members approve. How about one word? Did he change one word, Miss Ammerling? Did Benny Thompson change an adjective anywhere? Ammerling says, well, you know, Benny Thompson did not try to negotiate with Trump to secure Bannon's testimony. No negotiations. She said this is because Trump never indicated to the committee that the privilege was ever invoked, right? So we're getting a little procedural, into the weeds a little bit procedurally, but it is still, it's sort of who does what first conversation. She's saying they didn't follow the proper procedure. Therefore, that's why we referred this over to a subpoena that got denied. Corcoran tried to ask her about how many members of Congress voted against the motion to refer Bannon to the DOJ. The government objects, right? All of those GOPers, 203 of them who voted against indicting Bannon, no questions about that. Defense is asking Ammerling about her past work for Democrats. Are you biased? You work for Democrats, right? And you also have a lot of political donations to Democrats too, don't you? Corcoran says Ammerling and Molly Gaston worked together under former House Dem Waxman, and they're both in the same book club together. So she says, well, not really. I mean, I'm not a political partisan. And she says, well, but you worked under a House Democrat named Waxman, and you guys read the same books, don't you? So yeah, maybe. Molly Gaston is the other prosecutor in this case. Wow. They both work together and they are both in the same book club together. So it sounds like Molly and Ammerling are in the same book club. So that's nice. Might be a little bit biased, I guess. Ammerling says, yeah, but I haven't been to the book club in a year. I don't even like to read. Corcoran asked if the book club folks discuss politics. Okay, but you haven't been there in a year, but when you were there, you guys ever talk about politics when you were there? Given the careers, she says, given the careers of the folks who were involved in the book club, it's not unusual we would talk about politics in some way or another. I mean, we are in Washington, D.C. after all. Says we always welcome relevant documents and testimonies, right? And she says if Bannon is interested in communicating with the panel, we would be interested in exploring that further. Corcoran asks about this since Bannon has since offered to testify, right? Corcoran says, you in your letter that you sent over to him, you said you wrote this, right? Because your staff, Bannon didn't write this. He doesn't care. You said to Mr. Bannon, you said, quote, we always welcome relevant documents and testimony. Well, that's interesting. So it sounds like maybe that October 7th deadline wasn't so hard and fast because you are still willing to take relevant documents after the fact, right? So it sounds like that deadline is a little bit more fluid. It's like, it's due on the 7th, but elsewise, we are okay welcoming relevant documents and testimony. And she says in the letter, quote, we would be interested in exploring that further. Sort of sounds like you didn't turn your homework in, but we still want to see it. I mean, I want to see how you did on that assignment. And so I still want to see it turned in later, which means, to sort of a Bannon defense lawyer, that is fluid. That they are not foreclosing the ability to negotiate. They're still extending it, essentially. We're interested. We would be interested. That's future looking. We always welcome. That's future looking. So now they get into that. Corcoran asks about this because now Bannon has offered to testify. Remember at the last pretrial conference, Donald Trump over the weekend revoked his granting of executive privilege. And Bannon said, I'm going to go testify now. I'm willing to do that. He said the only holdup was that executive privilege, and now that that's been removed, we can get into it. So they go up to a sidebar now. The judge says, get back up here. And Corcoran apparently is poised to ask about Bannon's recent offer to testify. So he wants to clear this with the judge. I'm going to get into this, Judge, with her, and I need to clear this with you. So the judge says, okay, here, everybody. Bannon, you're allowed to introduce evidence about your offer to comply with the committee. We know you said that you would comply on the verge of trial, but now you're allowed to talk about it. The judge says, okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are going to talk about this recent correspondence, but only for the purpose of determining whether the subpoena dates were flexible and if Bannon willfully defied the subpoena. Okay, whether the dates move and his intent to defy. Two issues. His views on executive privilege and other prior noncompliance are irrelevant. So get that out of your minds, jurors. And so Corcoran can also show Benny Thompson's response to Bannon's letter. And in Thompson's letter, he asked Bannon to first produce documents before they could be scheduled, right? Before the deposition could be scheduled. So it's like the subpoena had two different dates on there, right? The 7th date and the 14th date. In another letter, Thompson says, first produce the documents and then we'll schedule the deposition. So sort of two different structures. One has two dates set in stone. The other has one date set in stone, and then the deposition would be the follow-up after the documents are provided. So then the government now, or the defense, Corcoran, for Bannon, asks Miss Amerling, is Chairman Thompson indicating in that letter to Steve Bannon that he's open for a deposition at a future date? I mean, it sounds like that. And she says, no, he's indicating that he's open for a deposition after Bannon has produced the requested documents. And now this line of questioning says Sarah has opened the door for some zingers from the government. So then Vaughn, right? Vaughn, she's saying Vaughn asked Amerling about the lawsuit Donald Trump filed against the committee. The lawsuit was the same one that Costello cited. So then Vaughn gets back up, right? Vaughn is up now doing a redirect. And because of this line of questioning, Vaughn gets to sort of go down this road, says, all right, Amerling, you just heard from the defense lawyer, but now I'm going to come clean all this up and sort of correct the record on this. Says, all right, Amerling, are you aware of whether this lawsuit has been resolved? She says it has. And how long has it been since it was resolved? And she says, well, I think the appeals court decided it in December 2021, and then the Supreme Court ruled on it in, I believe, in January. So about how long before the defendant suddenly offered to comply with that? It was about 6 months. Talking about the lawsuit being resolved in the committee's favor, right? The government now, and that's the end of that. So they reference the lawsuit, and that's the end of Amerling's testimony. So we then change gears. Now we're going to go through the second witness, and this is pretty quick, I believe, because we spent most of the morning on Amerling. This is FBI Special Agent Stephen Hart, and he's somebody who was sort of monitoring Bannon's Getter accounts and so on. But this, I don't have an actual photograph of him because he's a secret FBI agent. But let's go back to the testimony now from Miss Lynch. Government calls after Amerling steps down. We have Miss Vaughn. Government calls FBI Special Agent Stephen Hart. She comes out here and says, okay, already having a sidebar now on whether the government can introduce statements that Bannon made on Getter, which I just created an account, but I'm having issues with it. So I'm not actually on Getter. But there are so many evidentiary issues in this trial that it's having the effect of drawing out the testimony and the day. Poor Sarah Lynch is yeah. This is a long day for everybody reporting on this, right? Because it's a lot of this technical stuff. It's very sort of grating. So the judge now and Sarah and Joe and everybody's over there like, Lord, can we just get some rulings on this? Fine. Yeah. All right, fine. So Sarah says, okay, fine. They're back. The judge is allowing it in. So we can talk about many of these issues about Bannon and Getter, right? Bannon's posts can now come into court. So this person takes the stand, and the judge says the Bannon subpoena is just the beginning. Congress's January 6th is going big. I'm sorry, this is the actual evidence. This is the post from Getter. Bannon says this on Getter. The Bannon subpoena is just the beginning. Congress's J6 investigation is going big. It's clear the government wanted these exhibits to prove that Bannon willfully defied the subpoena. Another post on Getter on October 8th, Bannon, according to Sarah, gloats about his decision not to comply, right? He's saying, I'm not going to comply. Steve Bannon tells the J6 committee he's not going to comply with its subpoena. Well, yes, that is true, right? But he has a whole slew of justifications for it. So like the Getter post is a Getter post. All right, we'll see what the defense does with this. Saying that Bannon is not going to comply with his subpoena. So that's it, right? Like a couple questions. That's it. He's done. We get cross-examination now. Corcoran comes back out for Steve Bannon, and he says that he's trying to raise doubts about whether Bannon actually wrote the post, right? So, Mr. FBI agent, you're looking at these posts. Do you know if Bannon actually wrote those? Did he actually write those? No, I can't be sure if Bannon did, or if he granted access to somebody else. Okay, no further questions, thank you. And the government says, nothing further, Judge. The government rests. And you go, whoa, that's it. 2 witnesses? That's all we got out of this case? And yeah, it's true, right? Sort of need a custodian of the records. And that's it. This sort of one of the officers or a citing on. It's like a driving on a suspended license case. It's really, really basic and minimal. Now, the government has rested, and Bannon's lawyers are done, right? Bannon's lawyers say tomorrow they're going to move to seek to have the case dismissed. And so, these are always headlines, right? Oh my gosh, they filed a motion for a judgment of acquittal. Yes, you do that in every criminal case, right? You file motions for directed verdicts, and you say the government hasn't met their burden, right? The defense doesn't have to do anything, right? You are presumed innocent. Really, you don't have to do a thing. You can sit there, right? According to the rules. And if the government hasn't crossed that threshold, proven beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty, right? If they haven't even hit like enough for the jury to consider, you can say, Judge, look, I don't even have to say anything. Okay. They came out on this case, and, a motion like this would be, the subpoena was invalid because she signed it before it was served, and they didn't include the House rules, and the subpoena was invalid. Therefore, Judge, there's no basis for the jury to find him guilty, and so you have to dismiss it right now. The judge is going to say, thank you for your motion, denied, onto the jury, right? But it happens in every case. So you're going to see a lot of those headlines tomorrow. The defense is going to make motions and oral motions and so on, but it's not ultimately going to mean, much of anything. The judge is going to deny all of those motions and then set the case for continuation, and the case will be ultimately handed off to the jury. So now this is the updated minute entry from Bannon. You can see the jury trial is going to be continued until tomorrow, 7/21 at 10:30 a.m. So a little bit of a later start, and we really don't know what it's going to look like with Bannon, whether he's going to be testifying or not, whether they're going to be calling any witnesses or not. Don't know yet, but we of course will be covering that. And that is the update on Bannon. Now on the trial. Now he was out here today, and this is a very annoying clip. So I apologize in advance, because there's some jerk who is whistling in here to try to deviate Bannon, right? He's actually whistling loudly to try to stop Bannon from speaking. And I'm kind of surprised about this. I'm kind of surprised that, somebody was allowed to do that. You'd think somebody else, like in the media, would be like, hey, you're whistling in my eardrum, lunatic. We're all here to record this guy, and you're making it difficult for all of us. Like, everybody's just kind of standing around listening to this. But speaking of a friendly face in the crowd, take a look at who's back there also doing some reporting. And let's turn this down a little bit.
The show trial, the Moscow show trial of the 1930s. Why is he not here in person? Does he really have COVID? Has anybody checked at all, or is he just saying he has COVID? Has Dr. Fauci come forward and says Benny Thompson really has COVID? This is an absurdity.
Who is this guy right here? Who is that guy? We know that guy. There he is. It's Joe Neerman, Good Logic, the goodest of all the logics and the Neerman of the Neers. He's over there at Good Logic on YouTube, and he is there reporting. Look at him. He's back there. And here's Steve Bannon.
It's completely and totally absurd. Why is Benny Thompson? They can't find any human beings. There's no human beings that will admit to anything about setting any date. Now, where is Benny? Where is Benny Thompson? Where is Benny Thompson? Okay, last thing. And you heard it.
So there's Ed Schoen. Everybody's looking at the Whistler guy. I'm going to have to ask Joe why he didn't go and backhand that guy. Joe, why didn't you just go give him a backhand? It's probably because he's in D.C. to be arrested and charged with insurrection, wouldn't he? Yeah, I probably would. So, but it sort of feels like you want to do that, right? And that person is a person is deviating making this difficult.
You heard it today. You heard it today. You heard it today. I stand with Trump and the Constitution. Trump won, Biden's illegitimate.
All right, and so Ed Schoen's back there, of course. Shout out to Joe Neerman. Please go give him a follow. He's doing awesome work. It's a lot of work to go down to court and, sitting there, and it's a lot. So make sure you're following his channel for his work. But the Whistler guy, so he's sort of trying to cause some ruckus and made it annoying for all of us. Now, we have some other news to attend to. And so as you can see, we've got Steve Bannon is going to be facing day 3. The prosecution has already rested their case, and so we can close that one up. Now, we've got some other closely related J6 stuff that I do want to attend to. We're going to take a quick look at what's going on with the Secret Service and their text messages in a minute, but we're also going to see what Merrick Garland had to say, because remember, this is the Attorney General. He was out here today. He was in front of, I think this was the Senate or the House or whatever, and he's getting asked questions about what are you going to do with Donald Trump? Bannon's just the tip of the spear, right? He's the first one through the gate, and this may be a domino effect or a snowball cascading down a mountain that just continues to get bigger and bigger until they go after the number one individual that they want, Donald Trump. And so let's listen to Merrick Garland. I'm going to play this clip. The audio is quite low, so I'm going to boost it until he gets...
A January 6th question. You have said time and time...
Okay, on January 6th, you've said time and again, so on. That's the question. It's hard to hear because the reporter's not at a mic, but then we're going to get to Garland here in a minute.
Again, that your approach is to move from the bottom up and to go where the evidence leads you. Recently, people have posited alternative ways of going about this. One of them is called the hub and spoke notion, sort of targeting the group of people around President Trump and then considering the rioters as one.
You can hear just I don't know if you can actually hear it too loudly, but the pain in this questioner's voice. Like, we really are needing you to go after Trump. Can you please do something about this? Hub and spoke model. We've got all sorts of different modalities that you can use. Can you please incriminate him? Please go after Trump. He's begging him to do it.
One spoke, and also looking at the elector scheme is another spoke. Can you just explain to us if there was a decision point early on in which you decided to go the way that you did, why you rejected these other potential paths? And as a follow, have you seen anything either coming out of Fulton County in Georgia or anything out of the January 6th committee that has moved the investigation in a new direction?
So there are a number of assumptions based into this leading question. I'm very familiar with as a former trial lawyer, but there is a lot of speculation about what the Justice Department is doing, what it's not doing, what our theories are, what our theories aren't, and there will continue to be that speculation.
So no answers.
That's because a central tenet of the way in which the Justice Department investigates, a central tenet of the rule of law, is that we do not do our investigations in public. This is the most wide-ranging investigation and the most important investigation that the Justice Department has ever entered into. And we have done so because this effort to upend a legitimate election, transferring power from one administration to another, cuts at the fundamental of American democracy. We have to get this right. And for people who are concerned, as I think every American should be, about protecting democracy, we have to do two things.
All right, so look, I've said this on the morning walk and talks. I'm not so sure about Merrick Garland. You know, I think he knows that if he indicts Donald Trump, this opens up a major can of worms. Okay, and I can't even understate this. Right, this would make this basically every single criminal case that he's prosecuted would now almost be kind of lumped in as a pseudo co-defendant of Donald Trump. Right, I mean, if I'm a criminal defense lawyer and I'm representing somebody, and my guy is like, you know, sort of a low-level player in the whole scheme, right? The Democrats are sort of considering this to be like a scheme, like a criminal operation, like analogous to a mob, right? Like a mob is in control. Donald Trump is his criminal head honcho and has all of his deputies out there, Bannon and Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani and all these people. And they're going out there and they've got their deputies down below, beneath them, the foot soldiers who are out there actually leading the insurrection. These are the Proud Boys. These are the Oath Keepers, okay? All of that. 700, 800 or so of the foot soldiers have been charged according to this scheme, right? Which I do not believe for a minute. So do not believe that I'm endorsing this framing of this, but they're saying that's the truth, right? The foot soldiers, the insurrectionists are being prosecuted. The generals like Bannon are being charged, and the leader, right? The president, the mob boss, Donald Trump, is at the top. So if I'm a defense attorney and I happen to be at the R&R Law Group in Scottsdale, Arizona, shout out, and one of my lower level foot soldiers is charged on this, right? I'm going to automatically, if the mob boss is charged, I'm going to say he's the person to blame, right? Everybody's going to point their fingers at Donald Trump. He is the primary bad guy. I was just a foot soldier. Give me a better deal because now you've got the top dog, right? You don't need the drug dealer. You need the drug manufacturer, right? And you've got him. So what that sort of does is it makes Donald Trump a pseudo co-defendant. So if you're a defendant now, you want exculpatory evidence. You want anything that would tend to show your client is innocent, and you have a constitutional right to get that, right? And that means that all of your defenses, your ability to demand additional discovery and sort of continue and wait and see what happens with Donald Trump, it really is going to convolute the entire 800 cases that are still pending, in my opinion, which is why I don't think he's going to do it. I don't think there is going to be a Donald Trump indictment because I think Merrick Garland recognizes that that would be a bigger constitutional problem than anything that took place on January 6th, especially if Donald Trump runs. Right? If he announces he's running and then Merrick Garland indicts him after the fact, it's going to look like a political hit job because, I mean, it will be a political hit job. And that will cause a constitutional crisis of epic proportions. If Donald Trump, right, is running for office and you're indicting a former sitting president who has a very strong likelihood of being reelected, right? What kind of problems would that be? So what I think is happening is Merrick Garland is just sort of kicking the can down the road and talking all sorts of things that need to happen. And you can hear just the pain in the questioner's voice. Can you just please do something? Please. And I'm not sure that that's gonna happen.
We have to hold accountable every person who is criminally responsible for trying to overturn a legitimate election. And we must do it in a way filled with integrity and professionalism, the way the Justice Department conducts investigations. Both of these are necessary in order to achieve justice and to protect our democracy.
Just one follow-up.
Both of those things are necessary to protect democracy.
Do you think you have enough resources to do that? We know that the budget request that was made earlier this year was not complied with. Do you feel that you need additional resources?
The Justice Department would always like additional resources and would be happy to take them, but we are going to accomplish our mission here. The people in the Justice Department are committed to this. They are working 24/7 on this.
They're not going to do anything. Okay, that's what he said. They're not going to indict him because they know it's going to cause a major catastrophe if they do. I don't think that they will. If they do, I'll eat my words on that, but I just don't think that they're going to do it. I don't think, honestly, that Merrick Garland is as hyper partisan as he gets credit for. I think that honestly, he's sort of like the stealth figurehead. I do think the DOJ is weaponized and highly partisan, but I don't think it's him. I think it's Lisa Monaco. Lisa Monaco is the Deputy Attorney General. I think she is really the highly partisan actor. And the reason I've sort of buttressed this opinion, or how I've buttressed it, is that Garland was Supreme Court material. Okay. And most of the time, those people are largely apolitical. They sort of are conditioned to be apolitical. They've never said anything mildly controversial their whole lives because they want to be on the Supreme Court. So I just don't know that it's sort of in his DNA that way. But Lisa Monaco and the DOJ, absolutely. And so you even hear him. He's kind of waffling around. We'd always like more money, and all this stuff, but I'm going to guess that he is going to become more of a scapegoat, more of an impediment. And if he ultimately doesn't indict Donald Trump, man, they're going to be calling for his head, right? The Democrats are going to be very angry with him because he's the person who's supposed to be their savior. What if he declines not to pursue Trump? They are going to be very unhappy about that. So we'll see. We'll continue to follow that one. And now lastly, before we jump into your questions and your comments, I want to make sure that we take a look at this quick story. The Secret Service deleted text messages. Now, there was a lot of back and forth about this for some time. We are going to take a look at the New York Times article. As a reminder, the New York Times is just one of the most horrible garbage institutions that has ever existed. If you can you read the book, it's called The Gray Lady Winked, and I'm on the final chapter of it. I'm reading about sort of the wokeification. But the book goes through, I think it's 10 different eras of how the New York Times got everything wrong, right? They got the Adolf wrong. They got Castro wrong. They've got basically everything wrong. They've been on the wrong side of most of these issues. And so we're going to read from them today. just so two reasons. One, so I can make that point. And number two, so that we can see how the people who are on the wrong side of basically everything in history are reporting. Here, New York Times tells us that Secret Service says some missing J6 texts are unlikely to be recovered. So I want to just pause on that. January 5th and January 6th, critical days. Secret Service, critical entity, critical mission. Supposed to be one of the most professional organizations in the world, protecting the president, the most allegedly powerful person in the world. They deleted all their text messages. Just to let that sink in. The House committee investigating the attacks on the Capitol sent subpoenas, and they're not going to be getting them. So this article says the Secret Service may not be able to recover anything from the erased text messages. Informed the House that it was still attempting to conduct a forensic search of phone records. It delivered on Tuesday morning thousands of pages of documents, but not the missing text messages. Committee had subpoenaed the missing text messages and other material from the Secret Service. Secret Service said the missing messages were purged as part of a technology update and were not related to its work around January 6th. A little bit of a technology update. Other messages directly related to the work of its agents during that period were backed up and have been turned over to the IG. Development came after the National Archives said that they are very angry about that. And so I want to show you both of those stories. So here is the actual response from the National Archives. Scott McFarlane over from CBS, he says, National Archives instructs the U.S. Secret Service to investigate themselves, the unauthorized deletion of the messages. And here's their full statement. Remember the National Archives is like, it's an archival entity, just like the FBI, goes in and investigates crimes. Like that's their purpose. That's their reason for existence. Same thing with the National Archives. If the Secret Service doesn't have anything for them to archive, well, then they can't do their job and they're going to get very angry about it, as they have here. It says, Dear Damien, over at the Secret Service's office. Damien is over at the Department of Homeland Security, Agency Records Officer. So somebody over at the National Archives is like, who's responsible for that? Who's responsible for backing this up? Find out. Some intern gets on the website, goes over to DHS and says, who's the custodian of records over there? Damien. All right. So the National Archive says, all right, Dear Damien. And it sounds like Lawrence Brewer is writing this. You can see his emails down there. It says, Dear Damien, through several news sources, the National Archives, we have become aware of the potential unauthorized deletion of the U.S. Secret Service text messages. These reports address the deletion of text messages dated on Jan 5th and Jan 6th, following the request by the Department of Homeland Security investigating the response to January 6th. In accordance with the law, the archives now, right, they're referencing the CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulations. So you have the statutory law, and then you have like the code of how to interpret the law and regulate the law. And so they're referencing that, saying you have an obligation under the law to do this. NARA now, the archival entity, requests the Secret Service look into the matter. What's that going to do? It's like the police investigating themselves and finding nothing went wrong. If it is determined that any text messages have been improperly deleted, regardless of their relevance to the inquiry, then the Secret Service must send us a report within 30 days. This report must include a complete description of the records affected, a statement of the exact circumstances around the deletion of the messages, a statement of the safeguards to establish further loss of documentation, and details of all actions taken to salvage, retrieve, and reconstruct these records. Thank you for your assistance. If you have any problems, please send me an email. That came over from Lawrence. And then we saw that today, the January 6th committee came out. Benny Thompson, who's got COVID, came out and published this. Kyle Cheney over from Politico is reporting. This came out this afternoon. The Select Committee issues a statement raising concerns about the Secret Service's handling of the text messages, saying they violated federal record-keeping laws. So Benny Thompson now, I guess, is going to go after the Secret Service. Maybe he can subpoena them. Let's see what his letter says. He writes, actually, in accordance with Liz Cheney, they make the following statement today. There's two peas in a pod, aren't they? says, quote, the Secret Service has begun producing records to the Select Committee pursuant to the subpoena we issued last week. Secret Service is giving us some stuff, but we have concerns about a system migration that we have been told resulted in the erasure of the cell phone data. Benny and Liz say the Secret Service system migration process went forward on Jan 27, just 3 weeks after the attack on the Capitol. 4 House committees had already sought these records from DHS before the records were lost, okay? Just to say that again. The January 6th committee said we want these records from DHS and Secret Service. After that request, the Secret Service deleted them. Additionally, the procedure for preserving content prior to the purge appears to have been contrary to federal records retention requirements and may represent a possible violation of the Federal Records Act. So are they going to go now, the committee, and prosecute the Secret Service? The Select Committee is seeking additional Secret Service records as well, and every effort must be made to retrieve the lost data as well. And that's just bad. That's just bad writing right there. They put the 2 sentences ending with as well. The Select Committee is seeking additional Secret Service records as well. Every effort must be made to retrieve the lost data as well. It's bad. Not good. The Secret Service July 19th letter to the Select Committee can be found here, and relevant portion of the Records Act is over there. So that's over at the J6 website. Now, very interesting story. And of course, this one is in the law enforcement is complicit category. And we've talked about many of these, right? Confidential human sources were being embedded in there, according to several documents, even from the FBI. Political collusion. We know that Blake Masters, running for Senate, talked about it. Troy Niels from Texas said that Capitol Hill Police was complicit. We even heard from AOC and many others saying that the Capitol Hill Police were involved in it. And we covered all of that in a prior show. And so that, my friends, is it for the J6 Steve Bannon trial day 3 update. We covered a lot of ground, my friends. And now it is time to hear from you. So we're going to jump into the comments and the questions and the super chats. And I appreciate all the super chats and everybody who does support the show. You know, the super chats, the transcripts, they cost $1.20 a page. And so even though we haven't been reading through all of them, I have been ordering and paying for them because I ordered them at the start of the trial. And I didn't realize they were going to be coming in so late. So we may have to rethink that on the next go around. But my point is, thank you very much for the ability to continue to buy those with your donations, your super chats, your memberships, and so on and so forth. And so now let's get into the comments. We're going to start over on locals today. So I'm going to do a quick refresh. We had some super chats come in from Bear Ashby and from Kareem, and we'll get over there in one quick minute. Let's see what we've got here on locals today. John McGarvey is here. What is this? Hold on. Is this on the right thing? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, John McGarvey's here. So John McGarvey, so I posted a video today that talked about reflections on yesterday's show for members. And so he says, man, don't sweat the small stuff. Every expert started as a beginner. If you follow your own principles, you can't go wrong. It's a good comment. Good life lesson there from John McGarvey. Thanks, John. Glad you're here, my friend. I appreciate you. TOS Forever says, enjoyed our walk this morning. The birds have a beautiful song as you go by. I agree with your position and how hard you work to process and grow. Be aware that the deep core you are seeking for resolution may take years to learn. Even understanding ourselves takes a lifetime. What fun to pursue happiness in life abundance. A good comment there from TOS. I told you, man, there's like moving stuff today in the locals community. I love it. Thank you, TOS. C. Reed says, okay, so just thinking here, whatever happened to the 6th Amendment? I don't know. I don't know. What amendment? Constitution? What? Nobody cares about that anymore. C. Reed. Is this really happening in the USA, or is this the Spanish Inquisition 2.0? Seems impressive. The 6th Amendment had a good run. 1791 to 2002. Rest in peace. Pour one out for the 6th Amendment. Pour one out for the homies. Pour one out. Pour one out for the homies. Oh, that's too funny. All right, my headphones came out. I gotta reconnect it here. Hold on a second here. Hey, it's Just Cause's birthday. Are you kidding me? Happy birthday, Just Cause. Man, that's awesome. I didn't know that. Just Cows is in the house. Says, thank you, KB, for that. Yeah, that's awesome. Happy birthday, Just. I wonder, we're not going to ask the age thing here, but happy birthday. Hope you're having an awesome day. Just Cause, for those of you who are maybe not watching the chat or watching this after the fact, he is one of the mods who just mods the fort down, holds the fort down every time we go live. And we're very grateful for all of our amazing mods. Let's give the mods a shout out right now, shall we? Here are the mods. And we've got, Just Cows is in the house. And so we're going to throw a big fat, happy birthday on that one. Right there. Happy birthday to the Just Cows is in the house. And look at that. Hey, the K Bean super chat just donated as well. And so big shout outs to the birthday mods, and also to Zulu, K Beans here, Vientikis, Lean's in the house, playing hooky geomancy games, and I think I saw Lava as well. And so thank you to everybody saying happy birthday to Just Cause. Lava there with the super chat just came in over there. I saw that there. Awesome. All right. And so that was here. Jeremy's over on Locals. Jeremy says, Rob, there are two events that happened that day. One side, you had a large group of people who wanted to encourage members of the Senate to investigate things, which was about to get a vote to do. Remember that Congress was about to split up and discuss things. The second event was the people that did not want the proceedings to continue to be discussed. The second group opened the doors, invited everyone in to detail everything. The narrative being pushed by the J6 does not logically line up with the reality of who was doing what on the 6th. If one goes back and looks up a reason for a peaceful gathering that was called for by Trump, it was to encourage Congress to contest the tree electors. My point is, the J6 investigation is to make us forget why the people were there, instead make us believe something nonsensical. I totally agree with this, Jeremy. And I think it's even one layer deeper. I think that there were even like 4 distinct groups. There's a group of people who were upset. What I'm saying is, I think there were additional groups of people who were there not to do either of those things. There were groups of people who were there to only agitate things, and they were not there on behalf of any Trump organization, in my opinion. Ray Epps and others, right? Thunder7. It's a great comment, though, Jeremy. Thank you very much for that detail. Thunder7 says, isn't the law all about precedents? I mean, what about Eric Holder? What happened to him? There were more votes on both sides of the aisle to find him in contempt, but nothing happened, right? Can Bannon defense bring that up? Not really. No, because that's Congress. That's their rules. The vote to find Stephen in contempt was very close, as you mentioned yesterday. Yeah. But it's all outside of the judicial jurisdiction, right? The judge has said, I'm not going to go step into what Congress does. Not going to get involved in that. And that makes it difficult. Thunder7 says, can Bannon's team demand a doctor's note proving Benny really does have COVID? No. Seems like a very convenient I mean, they could ask for that, but the judge he's not going to make them do that. Seems like a very convenient excuse not to show up and answer any questions. It does, doesn't it? It certainly does. We have Jeff Rook says, Viva made a video with good logic. Joe spent some time explaining the difference between an error in law and an error in fact. I might have the terminology wrong, but essentially the ignorance is no excuse principle. I'm curious if you ever, yeah, it is, yes. Do you have any critiques of this principle? I'm not a lawyer. I can see the necessity of this principle in some case, but it bothers me in the most. Not least because I have friends who accidentally ran afoul of the IRS and served time for it. Do you see any case for re-examination of this principle in a system so awash with legal jargon that we need an entire professional class to tell us how to obey the law? What a great question. Yes. So I do agree with it. I think that our justice system has been highly perverted, that there are way too many laws on the books, that basically anybody can be charged with any crime for doing anything. And I'm a lawyer. I do this for a profession, and I still learn stuff all the time. What? That works that way? That's crazy. That's why they call it practicing. Okay. That's why you have lawyers who practice for 45 years and they still don't know what they're doing. Because the law is dynamic and it changes. It's very complicated. It's very convoluted. We are a society that has become overly policed. We sort of want laws and structure for everything. And what happens is over, decades, that it's like, a hoarder, right? You start bringing stuff into your house and before you know it, you can't walk through anywhere because there's phone books from 1985 all over the place. That's what our justice system feels like. Laws all over the place. And the laws, right, they're so detailed that you get different justice in different cities, not to mention states, not to mention locations around the country, right? And I agree with you. You know, I would like to see much simpler laws. I would like to see stuff that is sort of hard-coded into systems. And, you know, I could go off on this question. It's a really great question. The point, though, is that, you know, ignorance really is no excuse. And you have to think about this from an incentives perspective. If you gave people, the reason why this is a valid, and I think not going to change, if you made ignorance of the law a valid defense, then every single person who ever got stopped for speeding would just, I had no idea what the speed was. Do you know how fast you were going? Yeah, 115. Do you know what the speed limit is? No. It's 45. Well, I had no idea. I didn't know that. I didn't know. So, I guess, well, now you know. It's 45. Don't go 115, right? And it's a simplistic example, Jeff, but right, it's the same type of concept, right? It's the idea that people would be able to sort of, I didn't know, well, I don't know, and then nobody would be prosecuted. So the law wants to the law is oftentimes created not for the outcome that we see, but for the incentives that it creates. And sometimes those can be a little bit confusing. They don't automatically seem correlated with one another, but they are. VNT Kiss is going back to vacay mode. V, thanks for being here. Happy vacation, brother. Hope you're having an amazing vacation. Maybe you should invite Just Cause out there and you guys should just have a birthday party wherever you are. So shout out to VNT Kiss and to Jeff for those great questions. Miss Lucky says, Secret Service is bad popo at a higher level, like the FBI. It's not really a professional and ethical outfit, despite their image their PR people try to convey. That is true, right? There's stories of the Secret Service, right? When I was describing them, Sergeant Bob, I was describing them according to that public-facing PR image. But I do know that that is not the reality, right? The reality is that the Secret Service, right, they've been caught with hookers all over the place. I think they were down in Brazil, you know, going hog wild with all the Brazilian hot tamales down there. And it was, you know, a bad scene. Jeff Rook says, it's funny to me that both sides on J6 think the Secret Service deleting the text messages proves their side is right. It is funny, right? It is funny. AOC says, this was an inside job because the Capitol Hill Police and the Secret Service wanted to insurrect America and help Trump. Meanwhile, people like me are saying, no, that's not why they were helping. It's because they wanted all of this to happen. They wanted Donald Trump to look like a big idiot. And that's why they lowered the security, essentially, is my thesis. Thunder7 says, I love it when Bannon goes off on TV because he's telling normie stuff they've never heard about their fake news. He always makes sure to say that he always makes sure to say things about Trump. Miss Lucky says, Secret Service deletions are an attack on democracy. I felt an insurrection when I read that story right in my side right here, lower back. When I saw the Secret Service deleted those text messages, I thought, I'm insurrecting right now. I'm with you, Miss Lucky. And Facts Matter says Joe now has cancer. which I don't know if he does. I don't know if he has cancer or not. He said that on Twitter today. It was a very weird thing. He's rambling through a weird speech. Do I have that saved? Let me see if I have that saved real quick. Joe Biden has cancer is the weirdest thing. You know, he's just mumbling around and he's mumbling all the time and nobody knows what to do about it. They just, I guess the president has cancer now. It's one of the most insane things. Let's see if I can grab this. I am looking. If we got this video, come on, here it is. Yeah, here it is. Look at this. What a weird thing.
The other people I grew up with off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
What the heck is he talking about? So actually, this is the longer clip. The longer clip is it's even worse. Like he's talking about getting literally the oil slick off the window. Because like he's driving through a place in Delaware where there's like oil spraying off from the sky or something and landing on the car. It's very weird.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
Weird. Very weird statement. I'm not sure if he has cancer. I'm not real sure what to make of it. I don't really know what his deal is, but hopefully he doesn't have cancer. I mean, I know he's had skin cancer before. He's had like some non-malignant skin cancer. Is he talking about that? I have no idea. So that's our president. Nobody even cares. He might have president cancer. He may not. Nobody cares because nobody knows, right? Everybody, okay, cancer in addition to dementia. All right, whatever. So, all right. So that was another comment from Facts Matter on locals. And thank you to our local supporters. We have some super chats that came in starting us off earlier today. Bear Ashby says, sad, but he will be found guilty. And I think that you're right about that, unfortunately. So we'll have to deal with it, but thank you for the support. Kareem says, thanks for another great episode, Rob. Nice to see you again. It's good to see you back here, Kareem. Have I seen you in a while? I think so. It's good to see you here, Kareem. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for the support and the transcript dono. John McGarvey says, isn't the government buying the jury's lunch jury tampering? I mean, would they be okay if the Bannon team sent them out for a steak dinner at the end of the day? It's true. It's like, I think lunch is sort of, they call it like de minimis, you know, it's like, all right, it's just food. And it's probably not even that good food. You know, it's like, whatever. Here, have a sandwich from the local deli down the street. So it's de minimis, but yeah, it's like, Bannon says, hang on a minute, Judge. I got lunch. They're going to, what's the Ruth? They're going to Ruth's Chris, Judge, on Steve Bannon and the War Room podcast. Go support the War Room. Give them super chats so that they can go and take the jurors out for lunch. We got it covered. We're going to save the American taxpayer some dollars. Tara, thank you for that, John. Hilarious. We have Tara Rayner says, well played, Donald Trump and Bannon. Fluid timing on docs and appearance confirmed. 4D chess isn't for everyone. We'll see. I mean, I listened to a clip from what's his name, Alan Dershowitz today, right? And he said he's been alive for 275 years, and he said I've litigated over 1 million criminal cases, and I know everything. And he said that there was a strong likelihood of conviction, which I think is an obvious point. But he also said that he thinks it comes back on appeal. He says this whole thing is so convoluted, it comes back on appeal, and that's sort of the point that I've been making. So it's like, all right, maybe he agrees, maybe that's good. I think that Bannon and Trump and the whole team is sort of bracing for that. And that's where we'll end up. Thank you, Tara. We have Lava Java Lava says, happy birthday, Just Cows. And there it is. Another big shout out to our birthday modding down the fort. Happy birthday to Just Cows. Thank you for all you do. Hope you're having an amazing birthday. And then I think we had our last one coming in from, K Bean is here. K Bean says, great show. Happy birthday to Just Cows. Big transcript is a big grift. Yeah, I mean, look, it worked really well for Sussman, and I'm not so sure that this is going to be a useful endeavor moving forward. But the transcripts are available. Everybody, like, I really appreciate your donations, and I don't feel I feel sort of bad that we're not reading through them, but it's old. Like, we would just be sort of wasting time because it's so old. And they are still available on the J6 mind map if you want to download them and peruse them at your leisure. And to find them, just go to the Bannon here. If you want to find the transcripts, just go to Steve Bannon on the mind map and go to the individual days, like right here. I'll attach the transcripts when I get them later. But this is day 2, both transcripts here. And then day 1 has both of their transcripts there. So if you do want to take a look at those, please go do so. And then the last super chat of the day came in from Playin' Hooky 1 with no question but a dono. Thank you very much, Playin' Hooky 1. Very generous of you. And it's going to go to good use. It's going to go to transcripts, and we'll see what tomorrow's looks like. And because it's a shorter day, I might get them sooner because there may not be a whole lot of testimony, and we may be able to actually go through them. And so tomorrow we're going to pick up with Bannon day 4, and the defense is up. We're going to see how long it goes. I've got a message out to Nate. We talked about Nate. He swung by the show yesterday. Nate the Lawyer. He's over at Nate the Lawyer on YouTube, and he does great work. So I sent him a Twitter text today saying maybe we can sync up tomorrow and have sort of a debrief for the first half of the show, and then hear from some other attorneys tomorrow on the second half of the show if the case is concluded and if we get maybe even a verdict, right? We'll see. So we'll see. Tomorrow we'll have to continue to play it by ear. Lean says, yeah, have Nate on. And yeah, I mean, Nate's great. And we haven't spoken yet. So it'd be awesome to be able to circle up with him. So we'll see if we can make that happen. But that is it for me, my friends. That's it for the show. We covered a lot of ground today. I want to thank everybody for being a part of the program. One final reminder that if you do want to join any of our communities and get the daily walk and talks, some of the kind of the afterthoughts, other thoughts that are not directly show related from me, from the community. I mean, the best posts there are not from me at all, right? They're from the community. So come check us out, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Join us on YouTube, on the YouTube membership. You can click that join button right next to the subscribe button. And of course, a reminder, if you happen to know anybody in the state of Arizona that needs help, if they're facing criminal charges, our law firm can do that. We have a whole team of people dedicated to helping good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but beyond that, in their lives. We offer free case evaluations, 480-787-0394. We're doing super cool stuff with the firm right now, and I'm very excited to share some of that with you when we get there. But we are building quickly. We're having some fun doing it. We had a final shout outs to our Spotlight supporters who really support at a higher tier. And I just want to say thank you and share a little bit of screen real estate with you. And so please go check out and visit qsimple.com. John is a member, and I haven't seen him here. He's probably quite busy, probably doing amazing work at that website, qsimple.com. Shout outs to Chris Romero, David B3, and Dr. EMB in the house, who are also Spotlight supporters on the YouTube membership. But if you contribute an equal amount over on Locals, I can get you some screen real estate here to promote a social media site or to support a website, or if you just want your name on there, we can do that as well. And speaking of names, 63 Rambler says, say my name. And I just did, 63 Rambler. So there you go. Easy peasy, 63. Thanks for your support and your donation and for keeping the lights on over here, the transcript lights on. I appreciate it. But that, my friends, is now it for me for the day. We're going to leave it right there. We'll be back tomorrow to do it all again. I hope you have an amazing evening. Sleep very well. See you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.